Welcome to FailCraft, a podcast where we dive into the messy, real side of success and explore how setbacks become the stepping stones to growth and clarity. I'm your host, Ezekiel Iferia, and today's guest is Dan Schaefer. Dan is an engineer by trade, which means his brain is wired to look at broken systems and fix them. So naturally, he decided to tackle the most broken system of all, politics. Dan ran for the Missouri House of Representatives in a deep red district. And if you look strictly at the scoreboard, he lost. But Dan argues that the real failure isn't losing the vote. It's refusing to enter the arena because you are afraid of the outcome. He believes that freedom dies in silence and that the joy of democracy is found in the grueling process of knocking on doors, not just in the victory speech. He is preparing to run again in 2026, and he's here to talk about the dignity delusion, the disconnect between the voters and policies, and how to find happiness in the trenches of losing a battle. So Dan, I am truly honored and excited to welcome you to the show. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
taking the time to join us.
Well, thank you, Ezekiel. It's great to be here. It's an honor to be here with you. That was a very good introduction too, by the way.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. So let's get things started. You mentioned that running for office is not a cakewalk, yet you emphasize the importance of enjoying the process. So you ran a hard campaign and ultimately you didn't get the seat. So in the days following the election, I'd like to know, how did you separate the failure of the result from the success of the effort?
Well, that's a good point. One thing one thing I learned working as an engineer for many years, we would get frustrated all the time because sometimes we would work on projects that would get canceled. Sometimes the best ideas seem to fall apart before the product can be shipped out the door. You deal with these types of failures all the time. Most of them are out of your control, and so what the concept that was laid on me many years ago was enjoy the process, not the results. Don't attach yourself to the results because the results, as I said, are a lot of times out of your control, but you have to then find joy in the process. And, that speaks to me pretty well as an engineer because I got into this business because I enjoy technology. I enjoy using my creativity to solve problems. You mentioned that I find problems a lot. That's very true. It's very much like an investigation of anything else. There's the thrill of seeing some sort of phenomenon and then tracking it down and figuring out what it is. Politics is a slightly different story, though, because people, they don't always make decisions that you think are logical. They make decisions based on issues and the issues that they care about the most. And that doesn't always align with what many would consider their best interest. But be that as it may, when you're dealing with people, it's not like dealing with an electronic circuit or something. It's something
Yeah.
that they have other motivations and they have a mind of their own. And it's just, I think one of the problems with coming at this from an engineering perspective is that engineers tend to be very arrogant because they've gone through a lot of training. They understand a lot of science, a lot of math they understand. And so they think they can apply that sense of certainty to
Um,
politics. And I think that's one of the reasons why the United States is in so much trouble these days. You have these tech oligarchs like Elon Musk and and others like him, the billionaires basically. They have a sense of arrogancy about what they think should happen. And as it turns out, it's not good for the people. It's good for them, but it's not good for the people. And people are beginning to realize that now, but I hope it's not too late to begin realizing these things. So I know it's kind of a long answer. I hope I touched upon a good answer for you.
yes, indeed you did. And it's a very relatable response from, personally for me, being someone who has an engineering background, and I didn't mention it earlier, I have a bachelor's in mechanical engineering. So yeah, that
Oh, good.
was really relatable. So you are an engineer, and engineers, we deal with logic, science, physics, and concrete solutions. But politics, on the other hand, is often emotional, irrational, or messy. So, was it a shock to your system to actually realize that you can have the correct policy answer, and yet people will still vote against it?
Yeah. That is a bit of a shock. I have to admit that it's you stand around with your mouth open like, huh? How could people do this? But yeah, I think that ultimately people do have a reason for doing the things that they do, and it may be reasons that you don't agree with. But one of the first things I used to ask when I first got into politics, I was doing podcasts about politics years back, and I used to ask that same question: why do people vote against their best interests? And the answer, after much, much searching, the answer I found was no, they're voting for their best interests, what they think are their best interests. The problem is they vote for people who addressed single issues that folks care about, abortion being one of them, taxes being another. And so anytime a politician says, "Oh, I'm against abortion. I think women should be, forced to bear the children that they get pregnant with," people will latch on to that and they'll vote for that person, even though that person may turn around and vote for, okay, they'll go ahead, they'll vote the way that the people want on abortion, but then on a whole host of other things, they're going to vote against the people. They're going to vote against healthcare, adequate healthcare funding. So, rural hospitals are closing down, and they're going to vote against, a whole host of things that monetary things primarily. They really hurt the people. Here in Missouri, one of the things that the politicians have done, which has hurt the people quite a bit, is they've legalized these things called concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs, they call them. These are basically
Right.
factory farms where cows are just confined to a very small area, or hogs are confined to very small areas. And it's not only cruel from an animal perspective, but the waste produced by these factory farms is enormous. The state of Iowa, which is just north of Missouri here, they've been overrun by hogs that are producing so much waste. Each hog, it sounds kind of gross, but each hog produces about 9 to 10 times the amount of waste as a human being, and yet
Ooh.
this waste is, yeah, there's very few regulations on how to handle this waste. So they just take all this waste. It leaks into creeks and the streams, into the waterway. They take this waste and they spread it over farmers' fields. And in Missouri here, they're making it legal to not only have the CAFOs be in Missouri, but regulating the waste that they produce is very, very light. And the state legislature has told the counties that you may not make any regulations more strict than what the state has. And one of the regulations says they can dump their manure within 50 feet of a residential area. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't feel comfortable having somebody dumping a big pile of hog waste within 50 feet of my property. But this is the reality, right? And these are the things that these politicians will vote for, which works against the people. Yet, there's these single issues that they'll support the people on. And so people kind of get stabbed in the back. And that's depressing to see that.
All right, Dan. So, you use this particularly interesting phrase that I saw. You talk about the dignity delusions. Can you, in a layman's terms, from the voter's perspective, explain what this means in politics?
I think what I was getting at there, I'd have to go back and review exactly what I was talking about, but I think it has to do with the disconnect between what the people want and what they get. And what I might have been referring to at the time, I think I wrote this quite some time ago, but if I reach back into my memory, what I may have been talking about was the fact that people get generally around 30% of what they want.
Mm.
In other words, if people support a particular issue strongly, there's still only a 30% chance that they'll actually get it. On the other hand, if they oppose an issue very strongly, there's still a 30% chance that they'll get it. And that 30% remains constant. And this was based on a study back in 2014. So it's been a few years ago now, but Martin Gilens, I think, he's from Princeton University professor, and a guy by the name of Benjamin Page from Northwestern University in Illinois. Um, they got together and wrote this book that basically itemized all their findings. What they find is that the rich oligarchs, they get at least 70% of what they want. The United States, and this has been going on for years now, is not run by the people. The United States is run by the big donors, by the rich people, and it's become ever more clear, and people understand it a lot more today than they did 10 years ago. But still, I'm not sure, how to convince the masses of this and the dangers that it poses on us. But it's basically big money is running our country at this point, and nothing else matters.
All right, all right. So, you have this interesting slogan, "Our freedom dies in silence." Silence is often safe, it's comfortable, but on the other hand, running for office in a hostile district is loud and uncomfortable. So, for the listener right now who is frustrated with affairs, the world, but they are afraid to speak up. So, what would you have to say to that person about the cost of that silence on their safety?
Well, history has a lot of knowledge about what happens when people do not speak up. And one of the founding concepts in the United States here is this thing called the First Amendment, which gives people the freedom of speech. And people often don't use it because they are getting intimidated. In history, when people are intimidated by their government, people are afraid of their government, it only gets worse. The government should actually be afraid of the people, which is the way that the structure, at least theoretically, is made in the United States. So that being the case, when I say freedom dies in silence, it means that if you just go along to get along and you don't say anything when you see bad things happening all around you, when you don't get involved, if you have an aggressive government, it's going to continue to move forward and take more and more of the people's freedom. And people would come to the conclusion that, well, if I say something, something bad's going to happen to me. These days, we see a lot of angst in this country with immigration customs enforcement, or ICE. We're seeing that they are basically militarized extension of the Homeland Security. And it's hard to believe that they're not intentionally intimidating people. As you probably know that several people have been killed, several protesters have been killed here. And the situation is just wound up, and it's going to get worse. But what makes me proud is that people are standing up. People are pushing back, and they're doing so in a very peaceful way for the most part. I hope it remains that way, but I fear that it won't. But I hope it remains that way. And we'll see what happens. But, just running as a Democrat in this country, which especially in Missouri here, which is a majority Republican, that presents some danger as well. We had a couple of Democrats up in Minnesota several months ago that were assassinated by a lone gunman who had a list of all the other Democrats he was going to assassinate. And he assassinated a husband and wife and shot other politicians as well. So, it's a bit risky doing what I'm doing, and I recognize that. But I personally have never been the type to stay silent. When I see something wrong, I'll say something. And it puts me at personal risk, but that's who I am.
All
So,
right. I admire your bravery, Dan. So, you are running again in 2026. So, what did you learn from the first attempt that changes the strategy for the second? Or are there anything you would do different while running the second time?
yeah, I think when I ran the first time, I joined kind of late because I challenged the Democrats. Let me start over. I was an independent in 2024, the beginning of 2024, and doing podcasts much the same way you are. And I started getting directly involved in politics when I called up the Democratic Party one day and said, how come you don't have anybody competing against my local state rep here for like the second time in a row? And they said, well, how would you like to do it? So I, it was a challenge, it was like, okay, I'll do it. As I had some conditions before jumping into it. I said, I'm not going to be your typical Democrat, but I'll do it. So I did it back then. And so I jumped in kind of late. I didn't know exactly what to do. I missed a lot of the orientation classes because I jumped in late. I missed a lot of the orientations. So I just kind of played it by ear. I did okay. I made 35.5%, which is slightly more than what the rest of the county did in terms of voting for Democrats. So it was good to get to that point. But yeah, I learned, first of all, don't play the culture game. Much of my messaging in my first campaign spoke to cultural issues. And I realized, now looking at some of the studies, yeah, cultural issues, they sort of motivate people. They get them enraged. But when it comes right down to filling in the box for the person you're voting for, they think about the economy. They think about the next generation. They think about the big issues of the United States, immigration obviously being one of them now. Those are the things that they think about. And we would call them kitchen table issues. And so this time around, I'm focused on the kitchen table issues. And if somebody brings up a cultural issue, I'll make very short work of it. I'll say, okay, I support the women's right to choose. Next question, please. And people are always going to want to argue with me about that. And I'll say, look, that's where I stand. If you don't like it, then don't vote for me. But these are the hot button issues that you want to talk about, the cultural issues. I'll give them a quick answer. I'll just run to the next question.
A really great strategy you're pulling up there. So, Dan, for the listener who wants to get involved in speaking up via politics, maybe run for a school board or organize a community meeting or something. But on the other hand, they are terrified of public failure or being cancelled by the neighbors. So how would you advise them to build the thick skin required to actually stand up?
That's a question that has many answers. And the first thing you got to do is get off the sofa and stop yelling at the TV. It sounds kind of cynical to say that, but I think a lot of people have expressed to me a lot of opinions. But I also find that, a lot of people approach me with that same question, like, what can I do? What can I do to get involved? And like I say, there's a lot of answers to it. The biggest thing is say, oh, run for office, or like you say, run for school board, or run for county council position, or your city board, or something like that. But that scares away a lot of people. They don't want to get that involved. So I would also say find some groups that you support. There are many groups around here in the United States that support things like, I don't know, getting rid of the electoral college system, which is a crazy way that we vote for president. Implementing things like perhaps ranked choice voting. There are a lot of groups out there for that. And if you go to Google, you can just find them pretty quickly. Find a group you really resonate with and either donate to them or ask them how to get involved. Obviously people can donate to political campaigns as well for the candidates that they support. And it's also, getting out there in the street. I tell people these protest marches, these No Kings marches, we've got one coming up in another month here. It draws a lot of people. And if you're afraid to get out there and protest, don't be afraid, because you're going to be surrounded by a couple hundred people that there's safety in numbers, and you can get out there and hold your sign up. And it's actually quite amusing to hold your sign up and have people drive by and wave to you, or other people drive by and give you nasty messages. Either way, it's fun. It's feeling like you're getting involved. And while you're at these occasions or at these protests, get in touch with other people. Start talking to the people around you. I hand out my business card a lot, my political business card. I follow up with people. I've found some wonderful people that have joined my inner circle just by protesting. And so, you'll just make a lot of connections that way. And I think, one thing that I do, and I not necessarily recommend everybody do this, because you do have to stick your neck way out there. But I actually go to a lot of Republican events. Even though I'm part of the Democratic Party, I actually attend a lot of Republican events because they're people too, right? And not all of them are the crazy, foaming at the mouth MAGA type people. A lot of them are very reasonable people, but they just have philosophical alignment with the Republican Party. Fine. Go find out what they want, what they're looking for, and find out what their concerns are. And as a result, I've met a lot of wonderful people, even on the other side of the aisle, that, if I have to work with them in the future, I already have a rapport with them. I've also gone out with my opponent. We've gone to lunch before. We meet quite often. I meet my well, I actually have two opponents because there's going to be a primary on the Republican side. But
Mm.
yeah, I meet with them, occasionally. The person who's the incumbent, the person who's in the office right now that I ran against last time. I go to his office once in a while. It's a 2 hour drive for me, but I go to his office and chat with him once in a while. And it's a good policy to just be involved with people. Don't be so afraid of people. Um, 99% of the people out there are good people. They may disagree with you philosophically, but you just talk with them and you find out there's a lot of common ground.
All right, Dan. A really, really great piece of advice indeed. So here's a personal one for you, Dan. After putting your name on the ballot, taking the loss, and now deciding to dust yourself off and do it all over again with a better strategy. I'd like to know, what does being successful truly mean to you now?
Well, I think that we all have to measure success in a different way. A lot of people think success means you get a
Yeah,
lot of money,
yeah.
and yeah, it's nice to have a little bit of money so that you can survive without having to worry about, where your next meal is coming from. But that can be an obsession too. And so I think we all have to look at ourselves and say, how do we define success? To me, whether or not I get voted, whether or not I win this next election, I have put together an idea in my head that I'm going to be successful either way because I'm getting the word out there. I'm softening up the opposition a little bit so that maybe in the next election, if I decide to run in the election after that, maybe the next election I can win. But again, winning is not everything. It goes back to my initial statement about participation. Get your joy out of participating, and the results, the final results are often out of your control. And I look at it that way too. I'm knocking on doors. I'm meeting people. I'm I'm writing a lot of articles. I'm finding a lot of common ground with people. I find that I can help a lot of people, and that alone is, that's the joy that I get out of it. So yeah, would I like to win? Sure. Years ago, I was on a softball team, a company softball league. The only league where I actually won first place. Actually, the only out of all the sports I've ever played, it's the only trophy I ever got. I remember one day after a softball game we played, we were all meeting at the pizza parlor afterwards, and one of the guys, one of the team leaders turned to us and said, he says, I'm going to enjoy playing softball, uh, whether or not we win or lose. It's just that I enjoy it more if I win. So I look at elections the same way. I'm going to enjoy it either way, but I'll probably enjoy it more if I win. But that's not the main objective. Well, it is the main objective of campaigning, but it's not something that I'm hanging my happiness on.
All right, Dan. So lastly, to wrap up, for our listeners who want to sign up for Frontline Progressive or follow your 2026 campaign, so here is the best place for them to go.
The best place to go is to the website. It's DAN, the number 4, MO.com. It's danformo.com. Why is it MO? Because that's the postage designation for the state of Missouri. I don't know why they put an O in there, but I think Michigan got MI, so they had to give something to Missouri, so it's MO. So it's danformo.com. That's probably the place where you went. I put pages and pages on that website featuring all my podcasts, featuring some of my writing, my philosophy. It's a different political website than what you normally see. Normally, you'll just see like a one-page website that says, I stand for this, this, and this. Give me money. Here's the donate button. And I'm like, I have to deliver the goods. Sure, I ask for donations, but I give a whole lot more information to people, perhaps too much information, but I want people to understand that I'm not an issues-based sort of person. I am a values-based person. And it's really hard to convey values in just a one web page thing. So, I've put more information in there to try to allow people to get to know me as a person and what my judgment comes from. Because let's face it, there's going to be a lot of issues that are going to come up. If I get elected, there's going to be a lot of issues that are going to come up that I can't predict right now. But if people know what my values are, they know I'm going to be coming from that place of values, that my decisions will be in alignment with those values. So again, that's danformo.com. There's a jump off point or a link on that page as well at the very bottom for other pages, including this progressive newsletter that I write called Frontline Progressive. And that also is at frontlineprogressive.com. But you can see a lot of my writings there. Have probably about 130 articles there right now. I'm actually working on another one right now that'll publish in about an hour or so. Yeah, so that's where you go. And yeah, donations are always welcome. But if you want to just, if you live in the area here, yeah, obviously you can jump in and get directly involved. We're looking for people to knock on doors, to make some phone calls, to write some postcards, the usual kind of stuff that campaigns have to do.
All right, Dan, it's been a really great time having a conversation with you here today, and I am very, very excited to have you on the show today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Ezekiel. It's a real privilege to be here. I've listened to a couple of your other podcasts, and it seems like you always have interesting people on board, and that's good. I like your podcast.
Thank you very much.